Welcome to another episode of Backstage Agents. Today I'll be your host, Dan Banks, sitting here with my co-host slash guest, Christian Sancho. Good to have you, Christian.
It's good to be here.
It's great that Christian asked me to be a part of this, and I appreciate you asking me to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And excited about what we're going to be talking about. So, are you?
I am.
Okay.
Well, let's see what you got for me.
Let's see what you got.
Yeah.
I made notes because
You're a better person than I am.
pretty much. No, I'm not. I'm definitely not a better person, but I'll get off track. So, I mean, let's pretend nobody knows who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you from?
Grew up in Wisconsin, right outside of Milwaukee, little suburban town called Menominee Falls. Great place to grow up. Loved growing up, still love going back. My parents are still there. My sister's there. I got a niece up there. And who knows? Maybe one day I'll end up back there. I do love Nashville, but I do love Wisconsin.
Now, are you a Yankee? Is that a Yankee? If you're not from the South? That's what I was wondering earlier.
I think the way that people determine that down here is north of the Mason-Dixon line. Okay. So in that regard, yes, I think people down here would consider me a Yankee.
Yeah.
I heard that a lot when I moved to town.
We're both Yankees.
Yes.
You know. So you grew up in Wisconsin, freezing cold.
Yep.
What's it like growing up as a kid in Wisconsin?
It was a good place to grow up. I mean, I had two great parents, sister. I think growing up in the north, those winters shape you. It's just something in your blood. It's a little colder. Everything moves a little bit quicker. The weather's not nice all the time, so you have your moments where you enjoy the warm weather. And growing up in the north, we really took advantage of that. Like summer, you look forward to summers, going up north, getting out fishing. I never did any winter sports. It was pretty much just grit and grin through winter, get through to the summer to just start to enjoy all the summer activities. But I think those winters, they shape you because they're tough. They're long. You know, when it's April and you get 8 inches of snow, it's not fun and not ideal. And, you know, you grow up shoveling snow and getting your cars out of the driveway. And unlike down here, you get an inch of snow down here, it shuts down the city for 2 days. 12 inches of snow up there and everybody's still going to work.
Yeah.
And it's very much grew up like that. You're getting up at 5 a.m, you're getting your car out, plows are already out, getting the roads clear. So life keeps going on up there in the winter, despite the annoyance of having to deal with the snow. Don't get me wrong, it's beautiful for the first couple of times, but you get into, like I said, March, April, and you're still getting snow. You're just ready for that to be over and to get to warmer weather.
Sounds fun.
Yeah.
It sounds fun. But it definitely, I can see how that, knowing you as I know you now. Christian and I met, a couple years ago?
Yeah, probably a year and a half, 2 years ago now.
Yeah. So when I met you, I just closed a real estate company that I owned, and you probably never even saw me in a suit before, maybe not. But
just pictures.
Just pictures. But all I knew of you was you got a gig here, and you said you're going to get your mortgage. Is it a mortgage license?
Yeah, mortgage lending license.
Mortgage lending license, and I was saying to myself, I said, wow, the interest rates, like they had already started to go up.
Yeah.
Right? The whole 3%, 4% days were done by then, and they were just on the rise. Inflation was on the rise, and I thought, well, there's nothing stopping this from going higher and higher and higher. And you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Yep.
And I was like, I felt like, man, I might even told you, like, don't do it, right? Like,
there was a lot of that. We'd get on the phone with people just kind of talking, doing some internal research, and a lot of people were like, man, your timing is bad. And I always joke, I have impeccably bad timing.
Right.
My timing is always bad, whether that be moving to Nashville or getting my mortgage lending license or just making a comment that doesn't land properly.
Right.
And so my timing just has never been great, and mortgage lending was another one of those where my timing was impeccably bad. By the time I got my license, interest rates were at their highest pretty much, and so I was going into a tough market.
Yeah. Much like those winners.
Yes.
Yeah. And the I guess the cool part about that is you didn't know any other way.
No.
So you weren't high on the hog, fat and happy, refinance king,
No.
made a bunch of money in Aruba.
I actually still haven't done a refinance.
That is amazing. So, I mean, I like you for a bunch of reasons, but to see you climb from that to now and be successful and never do a refi, I mean, that's a lot. I mean, there's people who are in the mortgage business that
100% refi. That's all they do.
100% refi. What are they doing now?
Not a lot.
Right. They're not doing much. So it's been cool to see your climb in that respect. And I gave you one tip and you took it. And I don't know if I'm the only person that gave you am I the only person that gave you this tip?
You were the one who broke it down for me. It was something that I'd heard loosely, but I mean, a lot of my business comes from agents, and so that's a big thing when you're breaking into the business is meeting agents. And your advice to me was, why don't you go? I know this guy, he's hosting an open house. Why don't you go and drop in and talk to him? And that was really early on, and when I started, and I was still trying to figure out how to meet agents and get to know them. And when you said that, it clicked. It's like, oh yeah, that's a place where they're at, and they're captive for 2 hours. You go in, if they're doing stuff, if they got people coming through the door, you don't bother them, but just go and introduce yourself and say hello and see if you can drum up a conversation. And I did that. I dropped into the one that you told me to. The agent wasn't there, but met somebody else, and I remember doing that and going, I should do this every weekend. And now I do. Every weekend I'll go in and drop into open houses, either co-host or meet new agents.
And that's remarkable. I mean, that you keep doing it, that you did it, but you kept doing it, and it's like a practice, and you built it from nothing.
Yeah. It was very similar to when I came to town, and I didn't know a single soul when I moved here from Wisconsin. A couple of guys that I went to high school with moved down here who were a couple of years ahead of me, but I moved down here cold. I didn't know anybody, didn't have any connections down here, really just on a whim. I went to college down here. I really didn't even want to come to Nashville. I knew nothing about the town, didn't even really know it existed. But I had a very good friend of mine that our family got to know who toured with a Christian artist, Stephen Curtis Chapman, at the time. And when I was looking at places to go to college and had decided that I wanted to pursue music, he was like, yeah, why don't you come down to Nashville? And so I applied to Belmont, got in, did that. But I got down here and I didn't know anybody. And I figured out very quickly that music, getting gigs, it's all about who you know and relationships, building relationships with people. And I thankfully had a buffer at Belmont with getting to know a bunch of people who were trying to do the same thing. And that propelled me into branching outside of Belmont. But it was very similar. I didn't know anything and I had to figure it out. Because mortgage lending, very much like music, you eat what you kill. And so you have to go out there and you have to find gigs and you have to make the phone ring. And so that's what I did. It looks very different in real estate than it does in music, just kind of where you go and you hang out and you meet people. But the concept is the same. You're just trying to meet as many people as possible and build actual relationships with those people, because Nashville is one of those towns people will see right through if you just come up and you want something from them.
Right.
And so you really have to build relationships with people.
Yeah. What are those people called that try to...
The term that we use here is germs, people who are very germy. They come up to you and you can tell right away that they just want something from you. They have no interest in a relationship with you other than the fact that they think that you can give them something.
Yeah.
And that's very easy to spot, especially if you've been in town and you've had any sort of success in music. Those people are going to kind of start to come out of the woodwork. And there's a good way to approach people and there's a bad way to approach people. So, and I've had people, especially younger players, do it both ways, and I can tell right away. I have a really good gauge for that. Are you really interested in learning from me and my experience, or are you just reaching out to me because you think I can get you somewhere? The answer is I can't get you anywhere.
And that was the cool thing about meeting you, is because I didn't know what you did. I didn't know where you come from. I think all you said was I played bass. You know, why did you? I mean, talk about bass. I mean, why bass? Have you always been a bass? Was there other instruments leading up to bass?
No other instruments. I was always a bass player. So my dad played bass all growing up, and so I watched him playing at church and just doing gigs. He played in a cover band for a really long time, a successful cover band in the Milwaukee area. And so I just grew up watching my dad play. And for the early part of my life, I didn't really pay much attention to it. But I really started, as I got older, to pay attention to it because I really liked the people that my dad was around. Like, I liked being around musicians. It was just a little different than growing up, and I grew up in the suburbs, so it's just a very kind of particular person that you're around in the suburbs. And my dad would hang out with these people that were really interesting and intriguing to me because they didn't look anything else like what I was surrounded with. And I was like, man, these people they're really cool. Like, there's something different about them. And playing music was that thing that was different about them. So I started to take an interest watching my dad play and hearing him play. And I just kind of slowly but surely, probably around 5th grade, I think, is when I started picking up bass. I didn't really get serious about it until high school. But yeah, once I started playing and I really got hooked on it, I was hooked on it. You couldn't tell me one way or the other that I couldn't do it. I was going to play music regardless of what anybody else said when I got hooked on it. So,
did you get in a band real quick?
So I didn't. I actually have a pretty interesting story. I didn't really play in anything besides school-related things until I moved to Nashville.
Oh, wow.
And which is very unusual. Most people want to get into a band and ride that and see if they can get signed, and which I wanted to do. Where I was, there was not a lot of people in bands. And so I played in jazz band, and so that's where a lot of my background was playing jazz. I was never good at it. I thought I was really good at it, but I was not good at it. Terrible. I love the music, but I kind of figured out pretty quickly when I moved to Nashville and being around some guys who were really good at it. It's like, I'm not good at this, and I need to do something different. I need to make a pivot here if I'm gonna make a living at this, because I'm not these guys. I'm not this good at playing this music, and I'm so far behind. So, and I moved to Nashville again, not knowing anything about the town and how it functioned. And Nashville's, it's a singer-songwriter town, so you're playing songs. And I just kind of started to study that and really fell in love with playing songs, and from there got into cover bands and learned how to play in real time in a band. And I sucked for a while. Thankfully, I had a really safe space to do that at, where it wasn't going to reflect poorly on me, because it was with a bunch of other 18, 19-year-old kids where maybe they did have experience, maybe not. But was through Belmont. And so I got to learn really quickly how to do it. And then I had some really great mentors that I ran into that really started to point me, if you're going to do these are the things that you need to pay attention to.
So, that was, you were 18 at that time? Just getting a freshman in Belmont.
Yep, freshman in Belmont, 18 years old.
Never played in a band with other people.
Nope.
And then, so, this is wild.
Besides the worship band at church.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So, did you go to Broadway? Did you ever do that?
I've never played a gig down on
Never
Broadway.
played on Broadway.
I've never played a cover gig. So what I did, cover gig down on Broadway. I've played lots of cover gigs. What I did is I linked up with a guy who I went to school with, who is actually a real estate agent now and also an artist. But when I met him, he wanted to be an artist, and he had an Aldine rock country sort of vibe. And so we put together this group of kids from Belmont, and we started playing covers. And instead of going down to Broadway, we started reaching out to bookers, and we started booking these clubs across the US, and we jumped in a van and we played covers.
Wow.
4-hour cover sets, 5-hour cover sets. We do these week-long residencies at these clubs. And that's really where I cut my teeth and learned how to play as a unit. And it's an invaluable experience that I'm really grateful to have had, because I was young. I got to make all the mistakes, again, in a pretty safe space. When you're playing covers in a club in Farmington, New Mexico, the stakes aren't that high.
Right.
So you get to make some mistakes, both personally and musically, and just get it out of your system. And I did. I got it out of my system. I really learned how to play as a unit and just built on that foundation from there.
So you graduated Belmont?
I did.
And then you played for major acts?
I did. So
Was that after Belmont or during Belmont?
it was after Belmont. The first artist that I played for that had any sort of traction was a gal by the name of Haley Witters, who now is doing quite well. I love her to death. I will still sub in every now and then and get to make music with her. But she, at the time, she had a publishing deal through Carnival Music, and she was trying to get signed and do the thing. She put out a really awesome record that made a lot of noise kind of on the underground in Nashville. And people were really excited about this record. It's an awesome record. It's called Black Sheep. And I got the call to go out with her, and it was the same thing. We were riding around in her 4Runner.
Nice.
With a trailer hitched on the back. And it was my first taste of doing something that had some backing to it with the publishing. There's a little bit of money, not much. But that was my introduction into playing with an artist who did have some backing and some momentum behind them. And then shortly after that, I played with her for about a year and a half pretty regularly. And then she took a break because she writes as well and just wanted to recalibrate, relook at some things. So she took a break. And right about that time, I got a call to audition for this artist, Ashley McBride. And went in, auditioned, I got that gig, and I rode that, what ended up being a rocket ship, for about 5 years with her, and getting to tour with her for 5 years. And in that, doing everything else as well. Still subbing in on other gigs when I could, still jumping in on the occasional cover gig, just whenever the phone rang, pick it up.
Yeah.
And if I was available, I was doing it. And because the best way to build the network is for people to actually hear you play.
Right.
In real time. And that's how you build, the best way to build relationships is figure out how to get into a situation where other people who are doing the same thing that you're doing can hear you play, as opposed to just kind of approaching them cold.
Right.
And so I did a lot of church playing and all kinds of stuff. Just played with as many people as possible. Whenever that phone rang, I said yes. And one thing led to another. I was pretty lucky in a lot of ways, but there's also a lot of hard work, and I was really calculated. And I learned that as I started to do it more. The more calculated I got and the more focused I got on doing one thing and putting that out there, the more calls I got for that thing. So I very quickly started getting zoned in on what I wanted to do, and figured out what I wanted to do was play for an artist who had her band play on records, or to have the band play on records. And this was around the time Stapleton was just cracking on the scene. Brothers Osborne just put out a really hot record, and Jason Isbell had put out Southeastern, which was, I mean, for everybody in this town, that nobody had came or was in Nashville at that time who hadn't listened to that record. Really changed the scope in a lot of ways. And I started kind of doing my research on, this is different than Music Row stuff, the stuff that's on the radio. And the commonality between these things, I realized, was, these guys have their bands playing records. They're touring bands, which is highly unusual in Nashville. Usually it's session guys, and then you have a road band, and they're two unrelated entities. But there were these artists who were using their bands on records, and I thought the records were better. And then you kind of look at who's producing these records, and you start to get familiar with names. And I remember kind of figuring it out. I was like, oh man, there's this guy out there, Jay Joyce. He's making these really awesome records. He's really cool. I really like him. I think I want to find an artist who plays for, or who is produced by Jay Joyce. And I remember I was sitting with a buddy of mine, a really good drummer, friend of mine, and I told this to him, and because we were kind of in the thick of it, we were just trying to figure out what we wanted to do, and we had some success, but not a ton. And we were both kind of becoming more zoned in on what we wanted to do. And I just put this out there. And then I remember a year later, that's when I got the call, almost like a year to date. A year later, got the call to audition for Ashley McBride, who happened to be produced by this Jay Joyce guy. Auditioned, got the gig, and then spent 5 years on the road with her.
That's a not typical story.
Yeah,
that's the first time I've heard that. That's part of your story.
Mm-hmm.
And did you write with her? Was it all together, or was it one of those situations?
So it was still a situation where the writing was separated from the band. So I have one co-write. I did a track with my roommate at the time, who is still playing guitar with her, fantastic guitar player. And he would make these tracks. I played bass on one, and Ashley ended up writing to one of these tracks once. And so the only co-write I have on a major label record is because me and my roommate were sitting around at the house. I was like, why don't you come and play bass on this? Like, I'm playing bass on it, but it could use a real bass player. So I did that, and Ashley ended up writing and to that. And this is a testament to her character. She gave everybody in the band a co-writing credit on that song, which is also highly unusual.
Yeah.
Highly unusual.
For sure.
So, but it was still very separate. But we did get to play on her records.
That's cool.
Yeah. So.
And that's rare too. Like they assemble bands.
Yep.
And so to be in a band like you were saying is rare.
Yeah.
Rare. You spend a lot of time on the road.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, you've played. Give me 5 big venues you've played.
Played the O2 in London several times. Madison Square Garden. I've done Red Rocks. I've done the Gorge. I mean, I've done basically every big venue in the United States and beyond.
What's it like the first time you're staring at the audience from Red Rocks?
Man, it's something that it's pretty unexplainable. It's really cool because you dream of doing these things.
Right.
I remember the first time that I played a really big shed, they call them, with Ashley. It was right as she was coming up. We were opening for Skinnerd, and we were playing in Indianapolis, and there's this pretty famous shed there. And the shed is just an outdoor amphitheater. It seats like 20 to 50,000 people. And this is one of the very famous sheds that Dave Matthews played a ton, frequented. And I was a huge Dave Matthews fan as a kid. And I just remember walking out on stage like, oh, holy shit.
Right.
I made it.
Yeah.
Like this is what I dreamed. Like I'm standing on the stage that people I respected standing on. And there's no feeling like doing that for the first time. I can't think of anything, and if you could bottle that up and turn it into a drug, I would have a real problem.
Right. I think Dave Matthews has figured that out and continues to take that drug.
Yeah.
Called selling out shows of the gorge kind of level.
Yeah. It's cool because you're in rarefied air. I mean, you think of just how many people are in this town that spend a lot of time and never get to that place. And then you extrapolate that out to the entirety of the United States, how many guys there are who go to work every day but come home and they play guitar. Like that's what they do to unwind from the day, and they love it, but they don't do it for a living, but they would literally kill for that opportunity to step onto a tour bus and get to walk out on those stages.
Yeah. Were you scared?
You get used to it after a while. I mean, those first couple of big ones that you do, it is a little terrifying. But for me, I did not move to town. I did not have a unicorn experience where I got to move to town and had a huge gig a month or two later. I very much progressed up on a pretty linear way. Like it was not a big thing and then my life changed overnight. I've played a lot of really small grungy rooms for 3 people, and then you slowly start to step up and the venues get a little bit bigger. So it's definitely nerve-wracking the first time you walk out there, but for me, it was just kind of little progressions of I wasn't playing for 3 people one day and then walked out in front of 20,000 the other. It was, okay, we're playing for 3 people now. No, now maybe we're playing for a couple hundred, and now we're playing for a couple thousand, and now we're maybe playing for 10,000, and now we're playing to 20 to 25,000. So I very much got used to the production elements of that change as things get bigger in a very safe way. It wasn't surprising for me. There are some things that were surprising, but you get used to it over time. And then you have all that experience behind you, so you're not necessarily nervous when you walk out on stage. You're just very aware that it's different than what you were doing and just a little bit bigger.
Is it hard to retract after you played such a big venue? Is it hard to come back and play for smaller shows or clubs or anything?
It's funny, the more that I played the bigger rooms, the more that I came to cherish the smaller rooms.
Okay.
And
why is that?
Playing big rooms is cool, but it's lifeless. You walk out and it feels like the audience is in a different area code. And it's the venues they weren't built for music. They were built to play basketball in, or hockey, or you name it, or football. And so for me, it's cool because I was like, oh, there's a ton of people here. I'm playing for a ton of people, but it feels very disconnected. You don't have that connection like you do if you're playing at a small club for 1,500 people where the people are right up on you.
Right.
And I came to really enjoy that experience of people being close to me and just being able to see them react to the music that we were playing, which it's harder to do on an arena stage. You really can't see past the second or third row. And again, it's cool because there's a lot of people there, but it just doesn't feel as intimate as playing a smaller club does.
You had a beard. You had a pretty long beard.
I did.
Long hair?
Long hair, a beard. Yeah.
Literal rock star.
Yeah, I guess. And it was funny. I grew the beard out because when I auditioned for Ashley, everybody in that band had a beard. So I was like, oh, I'll grow a beard out now that I got this gig. That'll be fun. And the long hair was a pandemic project when I was watching my life fall apart. I'm like, well, I'm just going to grow my hair out now.
A lot of people did that.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah, because it was one of those things where it's like, well, if this is a terrible idea, nobody's going to see it. And it was a terrible idea, but I decided to let everybody see it. And
so by the pandemic, were you were still with Ashley?
Yep.
And everything shut down?
Yeah.
We didn't know when things were going to go back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of musicians I know went to work at Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
They went Uber.
Yeah.
Freaked out, different levels. What was your experience with that?
It's a good question. I remember. Yeah. I keep a pretty keen watch on the news and world events, and I just started hearing whispers of this thing in China, and slowly but surely, probably January, midway through January, February. And I remember we had a merch guy out with us. They run, at least at the time, they also ran merch for Garth Brooks. And I remember, small name. Yeah. And I remember him going, sitting on the bus after a show, he's like, we're not going to make it through the entire year of touring. Like, you're out of your mind. I don't think so. And boy, did I eat my words, because, you get into February, you're starting to hear about this more and more. And then by March, it was really evident that this was pretty serious. Mm-hmm. And so I also have a birthday in March, and March 14th is my birthday. And I remember I played a gig with the guys in Ashley's band at a small little dinner spot in Jolton, Tennessee. Jolton's Hardware, I think. And we were sitting there afterwards, and I'm looking at the news. At this point, people have started canceling tours, and it's not looking good. And I was sitting there with the guys, and I remember saying to them, I hope you guys enjoyed playing this, because it's going to be a while until we do this again. And at that time, the whole conversation was, 2 weeks, whatever, and it'll be back to normal. And everybody there was like, man, you're full of shit. Like, this is going to pass and it'll be fine. And it was like, and I'm a kind of a prepare for the worst, hope for the best kind of person. So I was like, I think it's going to be a while. And next day, I think I turned like 28. Sure enough, we get the call from management. We're pulling the next month and a half worth of dates. And I was just laying there, didn't even know what to think. And it was unprecedented. We've seen a lot of stuff in our lives, but this was something that I haven't seen anything like this. It really truly was something that was novel and new.
Right.
And there was no playbook for. And so it was a tough thing. I was sitting there because I'd spent the last 20 years of my life working for this moment. And this was at the point, this was kind of at a crossroads with Ashley, where she was putting out a record, a lot of traction, a lot of good things being said. And this record was poised to take off, and 2020 was poised to be her best year ever. And it was supposed to be awesome. And I mean, we played maybe 6 shows in 2020 and put out a record in the height of the pandemic, and first major label record that I got to play on. I was really excited, and it just was like kind of watching your dreams crumble in front of you. And it was tough. There were a lot of dark days during that time of like, oh, if we never get to go back, what am I going to do? This is the only thing I've done. It's the only thing I've ever cared about. It's the only thing that I want to do, or so I thought at the time. And what do I do? if we don't get to play again? And I know a lot of people had that same thought.
Is that when you started to think about mortgages?
Not necessarily mortgages. I'd always kind of had it in my mind that I did want to add doing something different. You get on the road, there's a lot of downtime that you have. And I'm a numbers guy. And so I thought for a long time, at some point, I would maybe jump into doing something like financial advising, because I also started to see how piss poor a lot of my friends were with money. Like, well, this seems to be like something that I can help with. And so in the depths of the pandemic, I started looking at going back to school to get a finance degree and everything that goes along with that. I talked to a couple of financial advisors, didn't jump into it at that point, but it was the first time in my life that I had entertained being and doing something other than a musician. And which was important to go and explore that at that time. And didn't jump into it. Touring came back. And I had when we were touring in 2020, I started to get this uneasy feeling when I was on the road, and just this feeling of this isn't doing what it used to do for me. Because at this point I'd played on the major label record. I had played pretty much all the venues at this point. I'd done all the things and checked a lot of the boxes, gotten free instrument, like everything you dream about as a kid when you go, I want to play music. I accomplished before the age of 30, which was awesome. But when I accomplished all those things, the shows, they weren't doing the same thing for me, because once you step foot on stage at Madison Square Garden, the second time you do it, it's just another arena. Yeah, it really is. And so I'd started hitting things again and realizing it's like, man, that's a time. It's killing my time.
It's a job.
It's a job.
It's a job.
Yeah, it goes from living the dream to being a job.
Right.
And I, as a person, am pretty money motivated. And for a long time, my drive to accomplish my dream stuffed down how money motivated I am. But again, when it turned into a job, I started going, I think I'm pretty underpaid for this job.
Right. Or if it's a job, then what are my other options?
Yes.
There's other jobs.
There's other jobs where you can make a lot more money with a lot less work.
Right.
And that's not to say that I don't love playing music. It's just I know this about myself. And I started to realize if I am just making my living on music, one, I'm not going to be enjoying playing music because I'm just going to be stressed about money the entire time. And I really started to not enjoy playing. And at that point, you have to ask yourself, well, why am I out here? If I don't enjoy the thing that I'm out here to do, why am I out here in the first place? And so I started asking myself that question, and I just started seeing the writing on the wall. It's like, I'm getting older. Like, I'm not 20 anymore. Not by any stretch of the means in my 40s or 50s, but I can see this coming. And I started doing the mental math. I was like, I got the gig with Ashley when I was 25 years old. If I do 20 years with Ashley, which is so rare. I mean, there's a few people in town who have been with an artist for 20 years.
Right.
I would be 45 years old at that point.
They get a younger, better looking bass player.
Yes. and even if I made it to that point, man, I'll be 45. Like, I still got another 20 years of work in front of me and having to provide for myself. And making a pivot, the older that you get, it gets more difficult, because at that point you might have a family, you might be married, you might have a mortgage payment. Like, you need to make money. And at the position that I was in, I'd started entertaining making a pivot while I was still on the road and trying to find something that was going to be amenable to being on the road. That was initially what I set out to do. Kind of squashed the financial advising idea because I realized after talking to people, it wasn't what I thought it was. And my mom was a mortgage loan processor for 20 years.
Right.
And she's like, you should check out this mortgage thing. You seem to be really interested in real estate, and you're good with money and you're good with numbers, and it might be a good fit for you. Started talking to a couple of loan officers, and it's like, what's the worst that can happen? And
Rates go up to 8%.
and that they did. And I found out really quickly what's the worst that can happen is you're jumping into a really, really tough business, because I made the decision to jump in. I had gotten let go from Ashley's band in June of 2022. And it was time for me to go. It was the best option for both parties. And there's a whole long story there that we can get into at a different time. But at that point, I was like, I'm going to jump into this mortgage lending thing and just see, just see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Are you happy with what you've seen at this point?
I enjoy it. Again, like doing a decade in the music industry, it prepares you for a lot.
Right.
I think one of the biggest things musicians will tell themselves is that they don't have any skills outside of playing music, which isn't true. Music, at the end of the day, especially on the touring side, you're a salesperson. Mm-hmm. You're selling yourself, and you have to have a technical ability to deliver. And so musicians who are great are good salespeople, because anybody can play this stuff, especially out of Nashville. It doesn't take much ability to play music, and especially with the integration of playing to backing tracks and whatnot, you don't need to be great to get a live gig. There's a phrase that goes around that I've heard a lot of people say. It's unfortunate because I think it devalues musicians, especially the great ones. But you just need to be good enough to get the gig. Mm. And in Nashville, the reality is you don't have to be that good to get a gig. You just have to be good enough. Mm. And so totally lost my train of thought there.
You got to be a good hang.
Yes,
you got to be a better hang than you are playing, because I mean it's a finite amount of notes.
Yes, exactly.
I remember my friend was a bass player. He is a bass player, but he went to corner music back when we had corner music, and he picked up the bass and he went crazy on it. And some guy said, "What are you doing? Those are all out of town chords." He goes, "You're never gonna. All you need to know is G.
Yep.
You need to know G, C, D." And he was squashed this kid.
Yeah.
But it's true.
Yeah. And that's what I was
to an extent
getting around to, is it's the ability is not necessarily what's important in getting a gig. It's everything else. You're on a tour bus 23 hours a day. And in our case, we were 11 deep on our bus, which is just over 500 square feet. Smaller than a college dorm room. And so you have to be able to hang. You're juggling personalities that are not the most healthy personalities, and there's a lot of interpersonal skills. You have to be able to read a room really, really well. And these are all skills that are highly translatable to anything else, and will make you good at anything else.
It's kind of like a jail on wheels.
Yes. Oh yeah, that started.
But you're closer. You sleep closer.
Yeah.
You stack, right?
Stacked. So yeah, tour bus layout. You get, especially in the bunk area, there are 3, 6, 9, 12 bunks back there, and so then they're stacked on. It's like summer camp, but smaller than summer camp, and you're talking about 11 grown adults in this small space. And every time I see a tour bus roll down the road now, I just shudder. I mean,
PTSD.
It is PTSD. It's because you think when you move to town, like, all you want to do is be on a bus. Yeah, man. And then you're on a bus for a while, and all you realize it's just a whole new set of problems.
Have you ever had any good bus stories, breakdowns, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, man, we've just had so many over the years of doing it. That's the thing with those big vehicles, they break down all the time. And we had a summer we were with a particular coach company. We were on a not great bus of theirs, and every weekend those buses broke down. And when you're doing that, it's a pain because bus breaks down. You either have to figure out how to get to the next place. And if you're not, and usually that means if you're in near Nashville, Southwest region, you're getting a rescue bus. They're sending a rescue bus from Nashville. You're moving all your stuff over to this bus. And then you're on that bus for the rest of the weekend. Now, our most gnarly breakdown was we were playing the Gorge Amphitheater. And when you roll backstage on the Gorge, it's a huge hill down into it. So we're playing at a festival out there, Watershed, and I'm in bed, and we have a show the next day, and the Gorge is in Washington State. Our next show was in Portland, I think, somewhere down there. And I just wake up the next morning, and I can tell immediately when I get off, it's like the energy's off. And so I get up, and I realize that we are in the parking lot of the gas station that's next to the Gorge. And I'm just like, something's not right. So I find the driver, I talk to him, and what happened was we blew a transmission on the bus transmission on the way up the hill. And this was shortly after touring resumed in 2021. Shortage of bus drivers, shortage of buses. And we had to be, I think, somewhere in the flyover states, Oklahoma, maybe Tulsa was our next show, because we obviously canceled the show that night. There's no way to do it. Then we had a couple of days, and man, when you're out west, everything is more spread out than it is on this side of the U.S., and those companies don't have infrastructure out there. So there are no rescue buses. And so the bus company is calling in other buses from other companies, and we flip-flop probably 6 buses to get to the next show. And our bus then was stuck out west, and it was one of those like grab what you need, and we're going to try and make it to the next show, just flip-flopping buses. Drivers are like, yeah, I'm picking up so-and-so, but I can get them here. We'd be dropped off at a hotel. And then so like 3 or 4 days of this, made it to Tulsa. And then we didn't have our bus back for another probably 2 months, which had a bunch of our stuff on it. And it was just a headache. But that stuff happens all the time. I always tell people who are coming to town and tell them, you're in a logistics job. That's what this job is. It's logistics. If you're touring, you're moving from place to place, and you're staging a show every night. And with logistics jobs, I mean, just look at what happened in Baltimore here. Problems happen. Unforeseen problems happen, and then you have to adapt and adjust very, very quickly, and you cannot lose your cool,
right?
Because that will get you a ticket home real quickly.
In my perception experience, it's like different members of the bands have different energy, different archetypes. Most bass players seem to be the most grounded, holding it down. Like literally in the band, that's what you do, right? You hold it down. You're the glue. You're the peacemaker. You're the stability. Would you say that's...
I'm pretty laid back, and I'm a problem solver as well. So it's like, okay, I don't respond emotionally to much at all. I'm a very facts and logic person. So I'm intaking what the reality of the situation is and what needs to happen to get to the next spot. And in a lot of those situations on the road, you're just at somebody else's mercy of, okay, bus is supposedly going to be here. We'll see. And that can be frustrating. And when you get in those moments, but again, it's one of those things coming back to mortgage lending, like you're always dealing with things that are outside of your control. And so it was a good primer for getting into the mortgage business when you're waiting on somebody else to do their job. Sometimes that doesn't unfold the way that you think it will, and it's going to affect how you do your job.
It sounds like a really great primer. Like Wisconsin growing up made you tough enough to be in the music business. Music business has made you tough enough to be in the hardest lending era. You know, who knows what's going to happen with the rates and stuff, but we're not here to talk about that. But any tips if you were to go back and talk to your 18-year-old Christian self? Would you tell that kid anything?
I would set his expectations a little bit better.
What would you say?
I would say it's a very noble thing that you are going to chase this dream, and I would encourage him to do that. But I would also pound the reality of what that dream looks like once you accomplish it a little harder into his head. When you're 20, 18, 20, you just don't think about things that you think about as you get older. Like life gets expensive, like health insurance, paying your bills, having a mortgage, and I mean, having a family, providing for that family, what that looks like. I would have just sat down, because when I didn't have that necessarily, you know, I was like, you know, musicians don't make a lot of money, but you know, maybe if I get lucky and I end up on a big gig, like I can, maybe I'll make $100,000 a year. And I can live on that. Like that's fine. That's achievable. And then, I mean, as I got into it, I realized that's almost non-existent. There are very few guys in the touring world who are making that much money. It just doesn't, you know.
It's not all that people think.
No.
That's what I've realized. When my friend I used to play with in Naples told me what he'd make playing for Ricky Van Shelton, playing for Randy Travis. I couldn't believe it. We were making more money at the wedding we were playing at.
And that's, I mean, I know guys who play downtown Broadway, they are making more money than touring guys. And it's actually started to been an interesting shift since I've been in town, where guys, they would just go down there to make an extra buck when I moved to town. And now there are guys, if a touring artist calls them, they're not leaving, because they can make more money and sleep in their own bed playing covers to tourists.
And that's a new development.
That is. Yeah, I'd say it heated up before COVID, but post-COVID is when it really started to heat up. And you could really make a lot of money down there. A lot of money.
What would it take to get you to get back on a bus?
The right situation. I love playing music. I love it. And I still really enjoy it. But I've done everything that I wanted to do in music. And from playing on a Grammy-nominated record on down and everything that comes with that, I've played on all the late-night shows. I've played all the venues. So for me now, it's really has to be about the music or the people that I'm making the music with. And it has to be a situation where I am brought out there just to play bass and enjoy doing that. And I don't want to be tearing it up. I don't want to be doing, 150, 200 dates a year. Those days are behind me, but I would happily jump on something that's doing 80 to 100 shows a year on a bus, right music, right situation. It would definitely make sense. And what I love now about doing music or mortgage lending is I'm not concentrated on the money. It's pretty much an afterthought. I'm not going to go out and take less than I think I'm worth in terms, strictly speaking, in the musical setting. So I do say no to a lot of things, but I'm not thinking, or my whole life is not built around what I am making playing music. And most of my money now comes from other things, mortgage lending. And that just really allows me to get up there with the right people and enjoy what I do. I enjoy playing music so much more now every time I get to do it, because I just don't have that pressure. I'm not carrying around that weight of if I don't play this gig or make this much money, my bills aren't going to get paid.
Right.
And so that has been a really beautiful thing about jumping into mortgage lending, is that when I get to go out and play music, I'm doing it because I want to do it and I'm enjoying it way more, as opposed to I need to do this to pay my bills.
Right. It's a whole different feeling. Did you even listen to music when you were playing on a tour bus?
No, it got to the point I burned out so bad. I wasn't listening to music. I didn't care about music. I like the sight of instruments in my home would just basically like repulse me. Yeah, exactly. It starts to feel like manual labor. And I mean, really, it's been basically, I took about a year before I played any real gigs after getting let go from Ashley. And I needed that break because I'd come to hate this thing that got me through growing up, that I loved so much.
And you took to the highest level.
I took it to the highest level, but it was miserable. I mean, I remember playing Madison Square Garden, and this is when I knew I needed to make a change. I was playing Madison Square Garden for the first time. I played the show. I had some tech issues that night. It was a tough night. And I just remember going back to my hotel room in Times Square and just laying in my bed miserable. And I just played, again, a venue that people would literally kill their mothers to play. Like when you think about how bad some people want music, and I'm just laying there, I just did that and I'm miserable. Absolutely miserable. And
you got to listen up, kids. This is stuff that you don't often hear, because there's not many people even qualified to speak on stuff like this from personal experience. But this isn't the first time I've heard this. Yeah. This is the story. This is the story. Yeah. Right? It's tragic. But it's always the same. So to hear that you're able to go back at your discretion, not because you have to do it, because if you have to do it, then your scruples. I mean, then you start doing stuff you wouldn't normally do, and you're only bass.
Yep, and you're accepting less than you're worth.
Exactly, what does that do to your psyche and everything else?
Yeah, nothing good.
Good.
And that's why so many people in that world, they struggle with depression and mental health issues and substance issues. I mean, it spirals really quickly, and I've spiraled a couple of times. But it's great to be back in that place now where it's like, I have this real estate thing. Like, that's a job. I love it. It's a job, but I love helping people get into homes and help them sort through what is going to be probably the biggest financial decision that they make in their lives. And then I love getting up there and making great music with great people when that opportunity presents itself.
Yeah. And I mean, you have to, being in the music business in a very real way, you have to have discretion. You've learned about that, and to be a trustworthy source. And when you're trying to get a loan, you're going to take someone's financial temperature. Yep. They're going to spill the beans about every single mistake they've ever made. And, to think you could just pick any old person to do that, I think it's a really big mistake. And so is that translated for you?
Yeah, you need
tact.
Yeah, you need to have tact. I mean, in music, take auditions, for example. And I equate this to somebody calling you to take out a loan is like going into audition. You have a very short amount of time to make a very good impression on somebody and have them either trust you to get on a tour bus and live with them as roommates for over 100 days a year. And on the mortgage side, that looks like you have a short amount of time to make someone trust you to trust you with the biggest financial decision in their life. And so it's very translatable.
Yeah. So in that sense, it's really important that people, you're recommended by people.
Yes.
Yep. And even in that recommendation, they're putting themselves on the line.
Yep.
So, and I always think about bass players as, or bass players especially, I guess drummers too, but it's like you need a band to exist.
Yep.
So if you're a mortgage person, you need a deal to exist. Or if you're refinancing, or that's off the table for now. But you're at the mercy of the star in the band. You're at the mercy of real estate agents.
Yeah. My job as a mortgage lender and as a bass player in a band is to make the artist or the real estate agent look like a rock star. That's what it is.
That's
like,
tough.
I'm the support.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it's tough. I mean, I've played for a lot of artists, not great songs, and you're basically trying to turn shit into gold.
Right.
And that's a tough gig, and it's the same thing in the real estate world. And you get into some tough deals. But that's the job there, is to basically quarterback the transaction. Because the reality is, if there's a loan involved, nobody's getting paid if that loan doesn't close.
Right.
And that's huge. You have these real estate agents trusting you with their commissions. And in the same way that an artist is trusting you with their material every night to bring that to life and not to screw it up. And there's a lot that you can screw up in both of those things. You can ruin a show. A bad player can ruin a show. A bad mortgage lender, real estate agent, title agency, they can ruin a transaction.
And a bad cable could ruin the whole thing, and you could all be doing your job right. And in my opinion, it's like then you're all at the mercy of the appraisal.
Yep.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
That is a kind of a omnipotent part of the lending process.
Yeah. So then there's a lot that happens, but the goal there is just to keep it cool, handle everything, and there's always going to be unforeseens that come up in a transaction and on a gig, and you just have to sit back. You have to handle it. You got to trust that it's going to be okay, that you're doing your job well, and at the end of the day, it is to make the real estate agent look like a rock star. And that's kind of how I approach it, very much like I approach playing music, was being prepared. Again, preparing for the worst, hoping for the best.
Take the call.
Pick up your phone.
Pick up your phone.
Pick up your phone. Take the call. Yep. And just being there as a resource to help and making sure that everything is going along smoothly on your end. And you can't plan for everything that happens in a transaction or on the road. But when things come up that you don't expect, just not responding emotionally to them and just looking at the facts and going, okay, how do we fix this and how do we get this across the line? Just like if you're on a show, something happens, gear breaks, whatever it is. All I know at the end of the day is a show is going to happen, and what's changed is how are we going to make that happen? And it's the same thing in a lending transaction. Something comes up. Okay, how are we going to get this across the line now with the information that we have?
What could an agent do to make your job easier?
I think setting realistic expectations is a good thing, and then just referring well and referring to somebody that you trust, who you know is going to get the transaction done, who's going to treat your clients well, and somebody who's going to make you look like a rock star. I think a lot of real estate agents view lenders as this nuisance.
Right.
I definitely feel that way sometimes on the transaction. But if you have a lender that you set up well, that you get to and you refer correctly to your client, like this person is going to handle you well, they're going to take care of you, you run into far less problems in the transaction. And I get all the time, we get rate shopped a lot. That I've found is where a lot of issues in the transaction tend to come up. And well, the agent sent me 3 or 4 lenders. This guy's the cheapest. What can you do? Well, this guy is making promises he can't keep.
Right.
And then they may decide to go with that lender because it is cheaper, but then in a week from now, they realize, oh, this isn't going to work, and then they're back on my radar, and now I've lost a week, and there are probably some unforeseen problems that we're going to have to deal with because of that, because I've not had eyes on this now. So I think real estate agents, like viewing a lender as an asset to make you look like a rock star, I think that is helpful.
And I think if anyone would know how to make someone look like a rock star, it would be someone who's actually been employed to make someone look like a rock star who is a rock star.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it'd be crazy to go with any other person. Personally, you're my preferred lender for life, as long as you have a license. Because I know you have no control of rates. I mean, would you make rates 4% today if you could?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Anybody would.
Yeah. So, but it's like a steak. I always say like a steak dinner. It's steak. It's steak. Let's get steak anywhere. Go to the Ponderosa and have a steak, or go to Jeff Ruby's and have a. It's not the same.
It's going to be a very
so
different.
So if it's a little bit more to make sure it's going to happen, you can count on it. What I'm saying is close to gospel as you're ever going to get. You know, that's so important. Like you said, set the expectations, but then fulfillment of the promises. You don't got to worry about that, and you mean it because you know you don't have to worry about that. How many times have I personally been in deals where I've been told that, and yeah, I actually do have to worry about that 3 weeks from now, and I don't even think I have to worry about it, right? So I think it's great, man. I think it's great that what you've done and how you've transitioned. I think this is one of the perfect transitions, and then in the hardest time, and you've been able to rise up without any refis, but just taking that same grit that you used to get the gig in the big show, and now you're in the big leagues because this is Nashville, man.
Yeah,
this is no longer a secret town. This is no longer this is the big leagues now.
Yeah,
it might not have always been that way. Certain parts of town for sure, right? But this is no joke.
Yeah,
for real estate.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying all that.
Yeah, man. I really mean that.
Yeah.
By the way, too.
Well, thank you.
Not just because you asked me to be the co-host of this wonderful podcast, but no, I mean, and I don't say it lightly because I've seen so much stuff, man. We didn't get into that.
Yeah.
You can get into that. I mean, you got into music when you were 25. You said
lending. Or touring heavily, yeah. Touring. I've been playing since I was a kid, but touring heavily, I mean, basically since I moved to town at 18, but really picked up like 22, 23.
I think I got my real estate license in 2002.
Yeah.
Or 2003.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we had a much different. I think we're going to learn a lot more about you as time goes on, and vice versa. I think this is cool. We're going to have some really awesome guests. We know that, and we're working out the details on that, but just wanted to take a moment to get to know each other. Because I think if you're going to tune into this podcast, which you probably should, it's good to get to know who we are, right? Why should you listen to a bunch of guys like us? And the stuff you're talking about, you can't make up.
Yeah,
you live this stuff, and that's a big difference.
Yeah.
So, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Appreciate you listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
See you next time.